You're here, she was. Everybody on?
Yeah, for you.
We do 8:16? Yeah, we can do 8:16.
Hey, folks, Greg will be here later. In the meantime, as vice chair, I will be chairing this meeting. We are starting at 7:01 and we will start with we have no public hearing, I believe, yes? Okay,
Hi, Hannah.
so the regular meeting will convene. If people want to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, now is your chance,
Thank you. Would you like me to lead?
please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America, and to the republic for which it stands.
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, introduction of board members. Introduce yourself.
Rouse. Bill Cole.
Hershey Hirschka. Excellent. Are there any comments from the public related to anything not on our agenda? What are you looking at?
The Zoom behind you.
Oh, I'm looking in front of me.
Oh.
Anybody on Zoom? Going once, going twice. Excellent. We're going to move on to closing public comment. And now we're going to do approval of meeting minutes. We cannot do May 3rd because we do not have the attendees present. And we can do 8:16. I believe I have to appoint Aaron as a voting member.
Yes.
At this point, Aaron, you have so appointed. If there are no amendments to it, someone please make a motion.
I motion we approve meeting minutes from 8:16.
Thank you. And a second?
I second.
Excellent. And we will vote. All in favor? Aye, good, unanimous. Moving on. New business. We're gonna make this short and sweet.
Thank you.
So the only new business tonight is an ordinance amendment to chapter 140, attachment 1, table A, which essentially merges in our industrial zone 1 with our industrial zone 2. And I'm gonna let Denise, you're here. Would you be comfortable saying a word or two about why we want to do this?
Sure. Well, first of all, we have now the data that supports this, not to mention that I've been working with several
Hold on
developers.
1 second. Hold on 1 second. Can you turn off the air conditioner or something? I can't.
Okay, yep.
It's too.
Or do you want me to speak
Hold
more
on,
into the
Denise, I can't
microphone?
hear. I'm too old. I can't hear anything. It's too noisy. I'm too lazy to get up. I ordered other people to do it. Isn't that great? I love it.
That's what it-
Oh, that's good. Thank you. All right. Take it
All right,
away,
let's
Denise.
start again. So, as you received in the memo, primarily we've been working, I've been working with several developers, several
Please
landowners.
speak up.
How about if I do this?
That's better. Thank you.
That's better. Okay. So what I was trying to do is just have the documents ready to look at. Merging I-1 and I-2, the interesting dynamic here is in one of the districts, you can't have any residential housing, any mixed use, it just won't work. And in the other one, you can. And so you cross 236, one area allows it, the other one doesn't. It's very challenging for developers to understand why one side of 236 can allow certain uses and the other one doesn't. Second of all, and this is where I was having the documents here, we've been, like I said, working with the developers and several landowners, but the interesting thing is when we had Camoin Associates, we commissioned them to do this market analysis. If you look at Route 236 development, it's highlighted as one of the 5 main priorities. And then if you look at 3.1 and 3.2 is, to prioritize opportunity industries and also revise zoning to accommodate desired development. And a lot of the development it was noted that we needed more attainable housing. And I really like the word attainable because it's not like denoting affordable housing and kind of looking at it from that perspective. It's more, can people afford when they're out of college to come back and live here? I mean, can people afford on a very modest income and a young family? Can they afford to be here? And then you can see on item number 4, the priority is again to facilitate the development of attainable housing. Again, it asks for revised land use and zoning ordinances. So when you look at both the I-1 and I-2, we really need to consolidate them and have the uses mirror each other, because essentially there are only like, I don't know, Jenny, what did we determine when we did the research on that? 6 or 7 items, but
Yeah,
they're critical items
Yeah.
that are allowed in one zone and not in the other.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And your suggestion, I think from your memo, was that whatever was allowed in either one would then be allowed in both.
That's correct.
Some have,
That's correct.
can't do this here, now the other one does, both do.
Right. What's interesting is there are some landowners and developers that have properties on either side. But in order to crunch the numbers on, like, say, the Pumpkin Town side, to crunch the numbers, you need mixed use. And so that was one of the conversations that we had.
And we renamed the zones.
Yes, I suggested one, but I think Jenny, you came up with a really good one.
What's the name? I don't remember.
So instead of just an I zone, it's gonna be what?
Commercial industrial.
I talk loud enough, don't I?
Commercial industrial district, I think is the rename, right?
So it's gonna be commercial, industrial, residential, CIR.
Whatever, good. Greg, would you like to take it?
And I think the one thing that Jenny suggested that, and I totally agree, is that it makes no mistake that we're accepting mixed use and residential there.
Well, especially that on the, what side is that? The west side of 236, there already is, not a lot, but there's, you know, cluster of houses here and there, so.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mixed use really kind of mean the same as industrial? Should there be some differentiation between the two?
Well, I mean, you know, some people might not even know they're there, but there's this whole section of warehouses, right? Once you cross Fikes Lane and you go up Fikes Lane up the ridge there. And, you know, in the autumn and the winter, you can see them, but most of the time they're hidden, and that to me is industrial. And the parcels that were divided up of Pumpkin Town or behind it, those are all gonna be warehousey, blah, blah, blahs, right? So they're not, you know, that to me is industrial, that's different from commercial.
Yeah, and typically in the real estate world, mixed use refers to when you have both commercial and residential
Right.
in a single.
But industrial is sort of, I don't know how to square that away. I mean, that's where you're supposed to put your warehouses and stuff like that, but we also have retail going in there, so. I don't know.
Each of the other, just a track.
Well, I do think and Denise, maybe you can speak to this, as things get developed, we will no longer have places to put industry, light
Correct.
industry. And then.
So one of the things that I would suggest, I mean, I suggested commercial industrial so that people would just understand. You know, you could keep it simple. Just rename it it's industrial. It still has the accepted uses. It still has the definitions. Nothing's going to change. And then when you do a comprehensive zoning ordinance revision, then you can figure out what type of title would make a whole lot of sense for that area. And you may need to expand the zone. So right now, the current status for merging just means that whatever use is accepted, whatever is the least restrictive will occupy both districts, and you'll have one industrial. So if you don't want to even deal with a title change, I might suggest you just do industrial and nothing changes. The boundaries don't change, uses don't change, they just get merged. And keep it simple until you're ready to undertake a comprehensive zoning ordinance revision.
I'm less worried about a name change than I am of ensuring that the intent of having space in town for industrial uses isn't overwhelmed by other stuff.
I got you. Okay.
So I don't know if that's predictable or not. Right, and I know we have a TIF zone, I know that we're lopsided in terms of residential, but also, you know, we might end up with lots of retail or even housing and no industrial zone anymore, and then what do we do?
Right, and I think the folks that we're working with and the landowners are interested in selling their property. There's not really interest in single family homes. That's not what they're looking for. They need to have some element of mixed use in order to be able to, you know, put in their, whether it's industrial, retail, commercial, businesses.
All right,
And on one side of the 236, you can, and the other side you can't. And so that's essentially trying to make it congruent.
so sorry, on what side can you do what, and on what side can't you do what? In that, and just in regard to what you're talking
I
about.
don't have my zoning book in front of me. Jenny, do you remember which one it's?
Yeah, so they actually, all board members have the current ordinance in front of them, and if they flip through, they're gonna see where it starts yellowing that zone. They can read down through it.
So now.
Put it this way, you can't put housing or mixed use on the Pumpkin Town side where all the development you want to have.
So if you keep flipping, you're gonna see the yellow.
Well, I'm not different pages, they're looking at it. Right back. Okay, would other board members care to comment or have questions?
I have really, no problem moving this forward at least. I have no problem moving this forward to a public hearing. For further consideration, what we do after that. I think how quickly can that be done? It goes from us to the council. Is the council ready to really act on something like this right away, or is it going to be something that will hopefully be captured with the whole comp plan and our desire here to see if the council would really do to really redraft all of our land use ordinances, which is what we were discussing a couple of meetings ago. In other words, I don't want to say, let's do this, but then not do that, not follow what we were suggesting ourselves, so I mean, happy to move forward with a public hearing, that doesn't occur, at least it gathers an input. The changes that I quickly highlighted are not huge. What I want to do is I'm just going to go back in our zoning ordinance where they actually describe each of the zones and kind of what each zone is trying to accomplish. Initially, I don't really have. And I do agree with the whole thing. We heard from Jim Benitez from the meeting or two ago. As far as industrial goes, I don't really think we're looking at what we would refer to as, heavy industrial, like what you see out there right now is kind of what we would be looking at anyway. So I don't really, I wouldn't worry too much about exhausting our industrial area. Means you're gonna may offer more opportunity.
Yeah,
So I'm happy to move it to a public hearing and have that further conversation. I just want to go through and just do a little bit more homework on item,
that's fine. I don't disagree. Keeping in mind, we're gonna do a massive overhaul. I think it's worth moving this along by itself, because it's fairly simple and straightforward. I think we would do it anyway. If we need more time to review, we have it, so.
If I might add, most zoning ordinance revisions, comprehensive ones, are at least a year and a half process.
Right.
This would just allow us to merge the I zones with, which I like to call low hanging fruit. Doesn't introduce any controversial element. The rest of it's comprehensive, and you need to spend some focused energy and time. It's not an easy project.
Denise, can you tell us, or can someone tell us? And I haven't seen all of this, what the acreage is roughly. Do you have any idea of I-1 versus or the number of?
I didn't really look at it. There's more developable land in the I-2, which is the Punkintown side. But here's the dilemma, a lot of it's not developable. So we would have to almost assess what's usable acreage. And when I say not developable, I mean, you can be developed, it can be developed at a price. There's a heavy duty amount of blasting in many of the sections, a lot of ledge. And so it's pretty prohibitive. And I think that's where the mixed use came in, where, you know, in order to crunch the numbers, you'd have the capability of doing all of that.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curiosity, how many lots are there within each of those I-1, I-2 and?
Yeah, you know, I can produce that information for you, you know,
Yeah,
to have that for your public hearing. Absolutely.
yeah,
A
right.
listing of all the properties, the ones that are in those zones and the ones that are actually in Punkintown. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think mixed use is really the way to go.
Because I thought your question was something else, I just wanna also state, and like, on behalf of Denise, that the I-1 and the I-2 zone right now have the same dimensional requirements, so nothing needs to change in there.
Yeah, I think I thank you for answering that. I mean, in the.
Well, no, I thought that was your question, I know it's not now, but at least it's good to know that,
Yep.
got it.
Would there be any unintended consequences of moving forward? Any board members have any thoughts of that if we were to do this? And we're looking at like, you know, couple massive lots out there in the I-1 area, you know. Yeah. You know, would we get into lot splits and some undesirable developments happening in the sense of being taken advantage of within our current ordinances? Anybody, Denise?
From my perspective and from what I'm seeing and hearing, I don't think so. But I can't guarantee that, right? I mean, I could actually look into that by speaking with the landowners and folks that I've talked with. I looking at the land that is going to be developed, as I stated, you know, I don't even hypothetically want to shoot some acreage, but there's some of the lots that 75% undevelopable because of the cost. And so certain businesses aren't even interested in looking at the lots because of that. But it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
I think the incongruence between on one side of 236, you can do certain things, on the other side of 236, you can't, and it's all one big area. I think that's the biggest challenge for everybody. I don't see there being unintended consequences. The area that they would like to use mixed use, you know, all of the abutting properties are, you look at the abutting land use zones, they're all residential. So I just, yeah. So I'm not seeing any, but I don't want to go on record for saying there aren't any, you know?
Right, yeah, no, I'm not suggesting or baiting you to do that. I'm really just,
Yeah,
you know, came up tonight and we're considering this for the first time. And I just doing due diligence on our end. I just want to make sure that we're not gonna pull the trigger too quick.
yeah, and seriously, Jenny and I and Hannah could probably work on some, you know, some research to answer some of the questions that are surfacing this evening before we ask you to commit to setting a public hearing date. I mean, it makes total perfect sense that you want to have everything under consideration, or we can set the public hearing date and we can provide, you can set the public hearing date and we can provide that information for you. Give us some time to get you what you need.
Yeah, I'm happy moving to public hearing. We don't have a final ordinance, public hearings together, and put a potential accommodation law. So, you know, again, I think you can do that relatively soon at our next meeting, and then just we can move forward with it right away, or just continue to discuss it. But we would have had the public hearing, and that's done.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anybody's thought?
I think we should move forward. What's interesting is that in I-2 especially, there's just a few really massive lots, right? They're not, aside from like the corner of Pikes Lane and 236, all of them are owned by like 4 people. So
Yeah.
not a lot, you know. And I think there's wetlands back there, but we'll get to that some other day, I'm sure.
We prevented the engineer to pick up on having setbacks. That was all. Thank you. puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm happy to move forward, we can have a public hearing or next meeting.
We
Are you okay with
need a
that?
motion?
Everybody would, yeah.
I make a motion that we move this to a public hearing at our next meeting.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Put a time on it.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. Do we have a second?
I second, great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure for clarity, you would like acreage lots. What else would you like for information to be provided so that I'm making sure that I've got everything you need?
And, you know, it's really more curiosity, the number of lots, I'm looking at Hershey's computer right now, she's absolutely correct, there's not a whole heck of a lot in the NI two. You know, I one has more, you know, what's developable, what's not. Just a general overview, I wouldn't, you know, go look at, you have any, but number of lots, acreage of lots, that kind of stuff, just some basic.
Sounds great. I can do that.
Basic information. And, so it's been moved and seconded, all in favor? Okay, great, and no one is okay.
So our last item is old business, which we had already decided, old business ordinance amendment to chapter 140-43 home occupation workshop. Are we gonna workshop that? No.
We have information on it.
I once again think I think this should get put off until we do.
But then, unless there's something pressing that we need to address.
No, Denise has worked hard in trying to move forward economic development. I think the I1, I2 thing is important, but this can wait until we revise the ordinance in general.
I would make a motion to table this until we bring it back up.
I second that. That's it. All in favor? Great. Well, that wraps up our meeting, I think. So, public hearing discussion, no. None. Any member comments from the planning board? Oh my God, get off your phone, Aaron. Sorry.
That's on live TV now.
Okay, sorry. I generated.
Just a couple of comments, we have one big item that's been hanging out there. You know, we've been pretty good about working our way through the various applications that are coming in. Have we heard anything from Sandville? Last thing was the third-party review. Have we heard anything on that?
Yeah, so that will be ready for our next meeting. That has its middle date of next Tuesday. There was some missing information that they had a hard time getting. They have it all, they're ready to go. One thing you guys do need to do as a board is vote in this year's chair and vice chair.
Put that on the next agenda.
Sure, we sure will.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Right now.
Yeah, we could do it now if you want to get it out of the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I motion that we keep the chair and vice chair exactly the same.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Hershey, will you accept?
I do. Greg, will you accept? All right.
All in favor? Unanimous.
That's awesome.
So that third party review, will it be in time to give you, Hannah, an appropriate amount of time to review it and discuss internally to help us understand what some of the issues might come up? Not saying there are, I just don't know, I haven't seen it.
The answer is no. Hannah will be not available for the next meeting.
Okay, fair enough. Will there
Hannah,
be
sorry.
will there be an assessment done by SMPDC to review the third party review for us as well?
Hannah, you're welcome to share why you won't be here if you want to. If you don't want to, then you can let us know if EJ is gonna be filling in for you or not.
I don't need-
Okay. We haven't talked about it yet, so I will ask him and let you know.
That's fine.
Sounds
That's
good.
fine. I just don't want to get there and, you know, be looking like a deer in headlights. I'd like to
Yeah.
have kind of an assessment of what we're looking at, so then put it off again.
Thank you, Hannah.
A motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Yes, I hope so.
Second.
All in favor?